Good afternoon and welcome to a brand new season of Mile High Discussions, a show that allows DPS students to come on and have their voices heard. I'm your host, Michael LeBois, and will be guiding and moderating our discussion today. Today's topic will revolve around the theme of social justice. But before we get started, let's have our guests introduce themselves. Start with you, Ndele.
My name is Ndele Garrett from East High School, and I love social justice.
My name is Emily Harrison. I'm a sophomore from East High School and I'm ready to go.
I'm Henry Paste. I'm also from East High School and I like business.
I'm Joe Smith and I'm also from East High School. That's all you need to know.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming on today. We really appreciate you giving you our time to talk about some very important topics, and we're grateful to have you here, so thank you very much. So our first question today is a pretty important one. It kind of pertains to a lot of things that go on in the modern era today. How prevalent is cyberbullying in your school, and what do you think should be done to stop cyberbullying? Who would like to begin?
All right. Well, in our school, in East particular, cyberbullying I think is present as it is in any high school. But I think we've done a good job at East creating awareness about it and coming up with solutions to deal with it.
What kind of solutions do you guys have in place?
The community looks out for each other. Your friends look out for you. Even kids you don't know who also go to East look out for you. And I think that's a really beneficial part about going to East. And that's like a really good solution to it. And then also there's just like pretty tight monitoring. Like even our school professionals, like the staff, they kind of have a rough idea what's going on, so they know if there's like a bigger issue happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Henry. The deans a lot of the time monitor things like Facebook and stuff, and so they know what's going on. So I think kids are a lot more conscious these days about the types of things that they say on social media. But at the same time, they make it to where you don't feel uncomfortable with your social media. So you can still be yourself, but you have to have caution too.
Now, as students, do you guys have access to social media during school hours or no?
No, it's restricted.
It's restricted?
Especially like our Wi-Fi restricts access to any sort of apps that pertain to social media. At the same time, like a lot of students will use cellular data, for example, and access it on their own, but it's kind of, teachers have to recognize that students are doing so and use their own discretion to stop it, for example.
Do you feel that that's helping in any way, shape, or form? Is it reducing any context of, say, in-class, I guess, attacks or a preference of cyberbullying in like the immediate moment? Does that make sense?
I don't think that the majority of the attacks are during school hours. I think that it's mostly when a bully is sitting at home alone and is bored. But we also have to keep in mind that the suicide Facebook groups that we hear about all the time are the worst case scenario. And those might be pretty rare, but if those do happen at East, and I'm not even sure if they have, but if those do happen at East, then we just need to go in, stop it, and get rid of it.
Well, what methods do you guys think can be used? Like, for instance, you said that the schools and the community is very involved to help kind of slow or stop that process. What do you guys see as has there been progress? Do you feel it's kind of stagnant? There has been?
Yes.
What do you think about that, Ndele?
A couple of days ago, there was an incident with two Caucasian females who had said a derogatory term on Instagram, and we handled it in a couple of different ways. We had a full-out meeting with BSA, Black Student Alliance, and I'm pretty sure the two girls have had discussions with full classrooms, and we started this thing called diversity dialogues that encourage kids to spend their lunchtime having these conversations and having their voices heard.
Is that specifically pertaining to issues depending on diversity in situations, racial issue, equality in religion as well? Or is that a little bit broad, I guess?
Right now, yes, but I feel like the conversation could be broad if we wanted it to.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You said you want to be involved in conflict resolution, correct,
Yes.
Ndele? Do you think that this is a good way to start even in the high school level?
Yes, yes. I feel like the first step to progression is identifying the problem and being on the same base with each other, and you can't do that without communication. And so hearing everybody's voices is the first step.
If you can't have the voices, then you really can't have the communication and discussion that's really necessary to fixing the problem. So like, and especially because we already have this diversity dialogue that is aimed at maybe solving these diverse issues, such as the use of derogatory terms on Instagram. I mean, like, we're going to be able to attack more problems, and especially as students hear about clubs such as this, or Black Student Alliance, or really any club that helps acknowledge the problems in our community, then students become more aware and they want to get involved and discuss things more themselves. And I think that, like as Nadele noted, is really huge, because if you don't identify the problem in the first place, then there's really no way you can stop it.
Fantastic. Well, I think that it's very important that you guys are all involved in, especially in Dele, in conflict resolution, and I think that that's a big part of the progression of stopping cyberbullying. The next question that we had on the table was, should social media comments be protected by the First Amendment?
Yes.
Why is that, Joe?
Everybody, sorry.
No, you're good.
Everybody has the right to free speech, and no matter where that is, on social media, while speaking, or even in writing in general, on paper, it should be protected no matter what. It is what our nation is based on.
I just have to disagree. I think that is very true until you reach a certain point where it becomes, like, if ideas become radical to the point where not where anybody's about, like where they become really racist, offensive towards a group of people, that's where like you have to draw the line. And I think when the First Amendment was written, maybe that wasn't in mind, but we have to kind of adapt and deal with that. It's just not really fair to say people can put out hate speech and yet it's fine, and we just have to like learn to browse through it.
I don't think it's the fact that like we should restrict the hate speech that is coming out, but rather that our society should acknowledge that such hate speech is bad and learn to have people identify it. Because by restricting things, even if you're restricting radicalism, for example, then you're restricting the voices of people who, whether you like it or not, whether your opinion is directly contradictory, you are restricting their freedom to say things. And while it might seem like you feel like your idea is better, people who are radical, they can't be stifled, because they're going to find any way that possible to let their ideas be heard. Rather, I feel like resources would be better directed at students identifying the consequences of using social media to that extent, or identifying other people's problems with social media, really. And if people, especially children, realize that when we're able to acknowledge and identify what hate speech is, then it'll prevent them from using that hate speech. So we can't just stifle the problem, we just have to find the problem and teach kids about it.
And if it does get to the point of hate speech, then that is a very bad thing, and they're going to be punished both in their own right and probably by whoever's monitoring it, and I don't believe that it should be monitored that much. If we stifle the hate, though, then the hate just builds up more and more until it gets out no matter what. If we allow for a little bit of hate to come through, then, I mean, the problem is going to get solved.
You allow the hate, but you allow the criticism too.
Yes.
Well,
See, I would rather take my chances and block that hate speech, because on social media, a lot of young kids, a lot of people are highly influenceable. So I'd rather take my chances with people like protesting on the streets, where like the news that's reporting on it has their own voice, and like it's like kind of like looking down upon it, which they correctly should be, and that influences the viewers more like that. But like on social media, when they reaches such a broad audience and a highly influenceable audience, it's just better not to take the chance and have like that grow. Because if you let like a seed be planted, like it will grow. So I would actually just restrict it completely and let it come out in different forms.
If somebody has hate, then the seed has already been planted. So if we let that seed grow into a tree without us really knowing, then it's going to burst out.
Which is why, like, you can't, like, it's good to prevent it, because you're preventing that, like, cyberbullying, but you also need to, like, not just prevent it, because if you're preventing, it's like, let's think about, like, the global economy. If you just stop something altogether, if you give a country, like, help, and they'll never learn to identify the problem themselves, they'll never fix their economy. But the same way like this, if you don't teach students what's wrong, and I feel like maybe restricting isn't the way to do that, but you have to teach people what is wrong so they can do that in the future, and it's not just these authorities stepping in.
And I was going to say, there's two ways that you can handle a comment. One, you can reply right? And that's a civil thing to do. There's nothing wrong with having a discussion or conversation. If you're putting something on social media, that means you have the intent on someone seeing it, right? And then the other option is reporting it. There is a report button, you know, at all times. So you can report something, but I think it's also important that, and I'm not saying it's a good thing that hate speeches are online or anything, but it's good to know people's perspective sometime and comment on it and say that you disagree so that they get your perspective too.
Right, and that's why we have conflict resolution people
Yeah.
like you, because after the fact, we can punish people for saying for having
That's
hate
not
speech
right.
on social media.
Well, why not just restrict it? Like, there's gonna be like a large vat of it continuing to grow. Like, you can eliminate it and teach at the same time. Like, it will never probably stop, at least in the foreseeable
Because
future.
if you
Because for
restrict it, then they'll just do it in some kind of secret group, and that secret group turns into something negative.
Well, also think about this as well. Another aspect of this as well. What about fake profiles or people who create like catfishing, for instance? Could that still be covered under the same concepts? Because you're now creating a falsified point of view that could be, you know, someone could make a profile of Ndele and spew hate speech, but he's not the one that makes this profile, or same with any one of you. What would you say on that front?
That's why the report button exists.
Well, that's why I'm more with the restricting. Because if like you start to allow hate speech, then you start to be like, it's not like allow, like clearly it's looked down upon, but if you start to make like exceptions and like not crack down on it, then you're also allowing room for other things to go. It's not like there's just hate speech. There's a whole lot of things that go down on social media. So if you want it to like help solve the problem, you don't want to let it grow, and that's where I think that even more comes into play, just restricting it. Because like if you don't restrict hate speech, and then like who's to say that you should be able to restrict like catfishing by that same like logic?
It's just a
Right.
falsely identified person, though. I feel like if you're using Ndele's name, then it's a different matter, because it's not things that Ndele has said, but it's rather things that someone has said under another person's identity. And in that account, you're putting words into someone else's mouth, right? And I don't like.
But same outcome. They both have huge negative effects.
And
But-
and in some senses, it would be a defamation of character, would it not? And would you rather stifle that early or let it blossom to show that it's not this person? Does that make sense?
Yeah. But on social media, there are also some very good things, such as like gay rights demonstrations put on social media. But for everybody who agrees with those, there's somebody who disagrees.
Right.
And if we get rid of the people who are disagreeing with it, then it's unfair to the people who agreed with it.
It becomes biased.
You become biased by filtering out certain things. And we need to allow for everybody to be free to say what they want to say, otherwise we're biased towards the people who we agree with.
Well, see, I agree with you there, but the issue is with that is like if you will like allow like that kind of thought, like it's legal, so like you're borderline on like hate speech, it eventually it will progress to a point of violence, and like that it's been shown to progress to violence. Catfishing, it will progress into like a kid being like actually like kidnapped. Like it progresses to that. Like compared to like allowing like gay rights to, like that won't like they will not progress to violence. It's a whole different animal from hate.
That is
to
not at all true.
No, it's from
That is
hate
not
to
at all
love.
true.
Like,
People at the women's rights demonstrations in D.C. after Trump was elected, like
and then
beat up
shouldn't they be
beat up
reprimanded for that?
anti-abortion women on the streets of Washington,
then
D.C.
they should be reprimanded for
It
that.
totally goes to violence.
Well, yeah, but they should be reprimanded for that, just as like they are.
Exactly.
But you're
But you
promoting
can't-
very different
but
things.
reprimanding is
But
very
how do we see
different.
that coming?
Sorry.
Joe, go ahead.
Reprimanding is very different from removal too. Like you can like we should have that media to say you shouldn't beat up women, but we can't like or what? Yeah.
I don't think
But
you should be beating up women
You
anyway.
can't just remove it. You have to like sometimes like as terrible as it is, if you don't have the radical views and you only have the views that are more moderate, then you're allowing for those other radical views to come in, and it's like yeah. Sorry, there was something I was gonna say.
Everybody in our country has a free right to free speech, and in a way you don't really believe in that. But if we allow somebody for free speech, then we're being biased against the people who disagree with them.
Now, on that same topic, if we allow for bias and we eliminate only the viewpoints that we disagree with, we have that choice on social media too, don't we? The opportunity to not pay attention you said that there's the report button and the comment button in Daily, but we can also choose to ignore or remove ourselves from that situation, correct?
Yes.
So would that create, for instance, if we ignore said situation, does that in turn silence them as well? If they're looking for a reaction and we give them none, does that do the same thing as a report or a comment?
Yeah.
In what way?
Yeah, because people don't care. I think that's like really what when you realize that somebody doesn't care about what you're saying, you kind of just stop saying it. There's two ways you could go with that too. It might push people into action. That's the scary thing about it, is that if people feel like they're not being heard, then they feel like they need to be seen. And sometimes being seen ends up being very violent. And so I would say that ignoring it, it can go both ways. It could be a positive or a negative thing. So it's kind of, 50-50.
Anybody else?
No, I agree with him. That seems like a pretty good solution.
Yeah, we're allowing for their free speech, but we're not letting them get a reaction from it.
Right.
It's the best of both worlds.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so far, but we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll follow up with the next question.
A lot of people think you have to be really good at numbers, and that's not really true. You do have to be good at solving problems. So we take students through all the basic fundamentals of accounting and hope to give them enough skills to go out and work in an entry-level accounting position.
Welcome back to Mile High Discussions. I'm your host, Michael LeBois. I have these wonderful students from East High School in Dele, Emily, Henry, and Joe. We just had a wonderful discussion about social media and the effect of the First Amendment, and we're going to continue with the concept of social justice today. Our question for you guys for this segment is the death penalty ever justified, or should it be outright banned? I think Emily wants to start this one.
Are you sure?
Thank you. I believe that the death penalty is not justified, and I think it's because the death penalty is very cruel. Not just cruel to like inmates, but it's ending a life that, even if it's deserved, and we're not going for the eye, or we could go for the eye for the eye. But the thing with the death penalty is, when death takes away, I feel like while it might create closure, death in the end means that prisoners are not suffering as much as they should, which sounds like really terrible. But to live in agony rather than end your pain is much harder, right? People who commit suicide, for example, committed to end their lives to end the suffering that they have. And in the same way, death penalty allows prisoners to just end their suffering and instead not have justice for their crimes.
But on the other hand, the prisoners could think that they could have a lack of suffering in the rest of their life. I mean, it just depends on what they think, which is why I think that the prisoners, if sentenced to life in prison, I think that they should have the choice between life in prison or the death penalty, if their sentence goes that far.
Why should they have the choice when they, let's say, people who get the death penalty, okay, they're going to be murderers, serial killers, and very few people get the death penalty at that, it's really hard to get it. But if you are at a point in your life where you have killed so many people and you've ended the lives, you give up. I feel like you give up your ability to choose for yourself whether or not you get death.
Either
I
way,
mean,
it's a
that's why
pretty
we have
terrible
our justice
alternative.
system.
I mean, it's either death or suffering, life in prison.
Oh, both great alternatives.
Yeah. I would say that I don't think we should completely outlaw it. I kind of agree with the idea that we should give people a choice because life in prison means, to me, it means that you're deciding that you know what you've done and you're willing to live with it and face the consequences for really the rest of your life. I mean, death means that, I mean, it's just kind of, you just want to die. I mean, like, I do feel like it's kind of an easy way out. But I would say that both of those choices should be up to them.
So the choice of the death penalty is not necessarily up to the prisoner. It's up to the judge and the jury who are placing the trial upon the prisoner. So it's the option of the jury to choose life in prison or the death penalty. Do you feel that the prisoner, though, should have the option to choose?
No, you forfeit that right when you break the law, I believe. Mainly, and also I would like erring on the side of caution. Death, I think, is one of the very few things that is truly permanent in this world. It is something that you will never fix. And our justice system is far from perfect. So, like, let's say someone is wrongly, like I don't know, sentenced to death penalty. Let's say, like, wrongly, convicted of a crime. Like, and you fall through on that death penalty, and then you find out, like, a couple years later that they didn't do it. Like, how do you explain that? That is permanent. And yes, it goes to the same point. Then they're fully paying out their consequences if they do it throughout their life. But like erring on the side of caution, like you would have to be so sure, but you can never be that sure. I mean, most of the time, yes, but there's always that off chance.
I mean, the jury could be that sure.
I mean,
do you think Hitler deserved the death penalty? Yeah.
the reason you
Well, I feel like that's a strong, that's like an international war crime kind of thing.
Right, but shouldn't the death penalty be used in that sort of case?
Well, I
But
think
that again is another situation.
Right,
altogether.
yeah.
but just you can't say that you can't be 100% sure, which is really terrible. Like, I know you can't be 100% sure, but the sheer amount of people who have gotten the death penalty and even been assigned the death penalty, it is rare that they actually follow through and die as a result. Like, the amount of people who suffer from the death penalty is so low that we're not even really looking at, like, is it true that it happened or is it not? Because at that point, you don't just give a random, like, 10 people the decision of whether or not a man dies, right? It goes through, like, you can't, like, it's a huge process. And I think when you go through the amount of blame that you have and the amount of processes in our justice system, you can't, like, it's so hard to say that the percentage is minuscule that anyone would be wrongly convicted and that they'd even die as a result of it.
Well,
I mean, if a jury came out unanimous and the judge agreed, then I mean, our justice system is for that. I mean, like, if the jury and judge come out 100%, then we're pretty close to 100% sure. And I mean, like, if this person has murdered however many people, maybe he deserves it.
Well, personally, I, like, in my own belief, like, I think, like life in prison without parole is actually a better punishment for those kind of crimes than the death penalty. So then I'm not willing to ask anyone else or me as a person to sentence someone to death and have that on me. Like, I'm not willing to take that chance, especially when there's such a good alternative present. Like, it's unfair to ask someone to have that weight because there's always that, like, one chance. And, like, do you really want anyone in this nation who is not a murderer or anything to feel that guilt when you have a perfectly viable solution right there that is arguably better than the death penalty?
But
we're to the point where we have the technology to find out if somebody has. Like, there's almost no doubt if the jury comes out 100% and the judge does. I mean, there's enough evidence to point towards that.
Even if parole is better, the death penalty offers closure for a lot of victims' families because if you know, like, let's say Bobby Bobbiness. Sorry for the terrible name, but Bobby Bobbiness is a serial killer and he's killed like 300 little girls, and only now has he been sentenced to, like, life in prison. And there are 300 girls' families, and it's not just the families, it's the security of the nation, and the nation and the safety and the knowledge of neighborhoods where the 300 girls were taken from. And having this killer die, while it may not be like actually giving while it might be like worse for the killer to live out his life like in prison, the death penalty in that sense offers a way for the community to feel better about itself. And in the end, like you kind of have to go with it because it's lame.
Well, and I think that you all have made valid arguments towards that point, and I think it's an interesting thing to look at for the future, as you guys are the future of our country and where we progress from here. I'm incredibly impressed by all four of you. I think the insight you guys have, especially on this very difficult topic to discuss in some aspects, has been very enlightening to me and shows me as as someone who's a little bit older than you guys, proof that it's fantastic. So if you guys, I would like to ask you if you have any final thoughts on anything we've discussed today, and I'm going to start with you, Ndele.
I would say that it's really important to remember that every human is completely different, and every human has thoughts, whether you believe that those thoughts are morally just or not, lies with you. And I think that the biggest thing that you should do personally is to ask yourself how you feel and how you should react to something.
Fantastic. Emily?
I think that today we've kind of, as Ndele noted, with everyone has different beliefs. One of the things that our generation needs to remember, especially in changing from the past, is that acceptance is key to solving any problem. And if not just acknowledging that like you have your own beliefs, but acknowledging others and seeing them as valid. And even if you don't agree with them, allowing yourself to question your own beliefs and others' beliefs is going to be key to how our society and how the world like changes and helps accept and make decisions that are beneficial for everybody. So I just kind of end with, people need to realize, or of any generation, and it's not just like the Generation Y that can do it, but if you open yourself up to informing yourself, then you can create a world of change.
Thank you. Henry?
I would just say it's like, after what we've seen like here today, like it's just important to every once in a while take a step back and understand your actions and just understand the full effects that every small action you as a person can have on the world, so that you can understand how to better, like, or at least have better actions or very meaningful actions, so you live a very purposeful life.
Cool. And Joe?
I think that it's really important that we all understand that while you may disagree with somebody, and no matter how morally unjust they are, they're not evil. And nobody is evil down to their heart. And we have to understand that everybody is a person and everybody has their own opinions, and that no matter who we disagree with, they're always just a person.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys very much for joining me today. For Ndele, Emily, Henry, and Joe, I'm Michael LeBois, and we will be back soon. Thanks again, and we'll take care.